Hey, welcome back. Here's a real easy question for you. What is America's favorite pastime? Haha, sleeping. No, not sleeping. Baseball? Do you know that there are people out there who eat, sleep, drink baseball? It is not a pastime. It is a passion. Our next guest. Wow, for him, baseball is truly a passion. My name is Vin DeQuino. His name is Bob Mayer. Bob, we go a long way back,
Yeah.
and you have taught me so much about baseball. Talk to me about this passion you have with this game.
Well, I have to go back quite a ways, Vince, to Little League and collecting baseball cards as a kid. And then some years later, probably in the early 90s, finding out that my baseball cards were worth a few bucks.
Oh, yeah.
And then starting to try and sell them off at shows and things like that and buying better things. And then I
So
got
you
in-
really got into
yeah.
it sort of like a hobby after a while.
Yeah, probably in around 1993, I started collecting other things other than the cards because I got a little disillusioned when they went to having everything being graded. And so I bought a glove up in Great Barrington. One time I was up there, I saw a baseball bat in an umbrella stand, and I picked it up, and it said Lou Gehrig model. I said, that'd be kind of cool to have.
Yeah.
I said, how much is the bat? He said, $10. So I bought the bat.
Wow.
Yeah, about
Today
three.
it's still worth $10, right?
So about 3 months later, I'm back up in Great Barrington, same place. There's another bat in his umbrella stand. I pick it up, and it says Rogers Hornsby model.
Whoa.
So I said, whoa, another Hall of Fame player. How much is the Hornsby bat? He says $20. I said, why is this 20 when the Gehrig bat was only 10? And he said, well, Hornsby was a great player. So anyway, so I started collecting bats and gloves.
Then you
and,
start realizing
know,
it's almost like a science, right? I mean, there's...
there are stores bought bats. You know, you could have gotten the sporting goods store, and then there's game used bats that were used by the players. I couldn't afford those, so I stayed with the store bats for the most part. But then I got into gloves and had a big collection of those, which finally sold off about 6 or 7 years ago. And I got into, as I started collecting, I started getting into what was going on in the Hudson Valley back at the roots of baseball. So I found
Then you started,
Yeah.
you went from like specialized antiquing to historian. You are basically a baseball historian.
Well, I've gotten to be a fledgling baseball historian. I started buying photographs of players in the Hudson Valley area.
And they're like little known heroes, kind of. You know, they're...
Well, here's a
The
guy
early players.
from Brewster who pitched for a team in 1886.
1886?
And
Wow.
the team did very well in Brewster, and he went on to play some minor league ball. My favorites, and put me on a big trail of research, was a team called the Wallkills in 1887 out of Middletown, New York. Now, this is I have 3 of these things, and I had bought them. And on the back is actually a scorecard of a particular game that season.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So,
and the scorecard is filled in?
This one is.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Some of them aren't.
That's cool. That's real history.
So when I in 2004, I bought a photograph at the Stormville Flea Market of a team from upstate New York called the Moravia team. It was the amateur champions of New York State in 1899. So I started researching some of the players and found out that one, a fellow named Lou Carr, actually 2 years later was playing third base next to Honus Wagner at short on the Pittsburgh Pirates. So when I had some vacation time at the end of that summer, I said to my wife, I said, let's go upstate and find out more about this team and these people. So we did. We spent about 4 days roaming around the Great Lakes areas, and I found a lot about Carr, and his family, and also about the team. But what I got most out of that trip was what we call the research bug. So the following year, when I retired from my career in banking,
So you were a banker before all this?
well, I was a financial guy in banking.
Yeah.
So I started to research these photographs from my collection.
Wow. I mean,
yeah.
when it comes to investigating and searching, researching, it must be amazing. I mean, there's so much information, but I'm sure, like with Sybil Luddington,
Yeah.
a lot of it is like lost and buried, and you have to kind of dig. But it must be exciting when all of a sudden you find,
Yeah.
information. You go, oh my God, he played on this team.
I got a few. Oh my God's right here. That fella, John Degnan, that we saw earlier, I went up to Middletown. I started researching them, and I found this photograph.
Pull that up. Make sure we get that in there, right?
And
There we go.
this is the state, or the SHA team, which is the State Homeopathic Asylum for the Insane in Middletown's baseball team in 1892. And that fellow, John Degnan, that we saw in the first place, is also in this photograph, as well as two other of the Wallkill teams. Now, the Wallkills were started in the 1860s, but kind of went dormant in the 1870s, and then started up again in the 1880s. But this hospital team started in 1888. Selden Talcott, who was the superintendent of the asylum, was watching a ball game one day between the patients and the staff, and how excited the patients were about this game.
Yeah, I could imagine.
So he called his staff
Wow.
together, and they formed the asylum baseball team. Now, while again in my research, I find one other photograph,
Oh,
a little
let's get
smaller.
that up there.
This is actually a real photo postcard, as they call it. And this was the asylum team, but in 1905. So that's 13 years
They had
later.
uniforms and everything.
13 years later, and they're standing in front of a building at the asylum, waiting to go play a ball game. Now, in that photo is not only Degnan again. Now this is 18 years later.
Point him out.
Degnan is standing over here in the civvies. And this fellow over here with a New York jersey on it, I recognized as Jack Chesbro, future Hall of Fame pitcher for the New York Yankees or Highlanders at that time.
Wow. See, that's
Yeah.
what gets to be amazing. When I was doing the Sybil research,
Right.
one of the things I would discover is that ordinary information that people have read over and over again means nothing unless you know some back history. And then you look at it and you go, oh my God, I get it. And it was a puzzle piece for things that we didn't understand. So you pick up this little information and you can plug holes with this information and put things together like some of these great players.
Yeah, well, this asylum team played from 1888 through the late 1890s, and in their first 10 years, they won 70% of their games. Matter of fact, in 1892, that first big picture of the team we saw, they went 22-2 that summer, and the only two losses they had were to the New York Giants.
Wow.
One game they lost was 4-3, and the other was 6-5 in
Wow.
10 innings. Very,
Wow, so
very
they're good.
competitive team. And by 1894, when Jack Chesbro came down with a few of his friends to play for the team and work at the hospital, when Jack was 19 at the time, they had a great year then too. But the following year, all the starting players went off into the minor leagues. Every one of them.
Wow. Did any of them go from the minors up?
Yes.
Wow.
Of course, Chesbro.
Yeah.
A fellow named Tuck Turner from Staten Island went
Real
to
good
the
American baseball
Philadelphia
game. Tuck
Phillies
Turner.
in 1893. Art Madison, who was from Massachusetts, played a couple of, what do they call them? Have a cup of coffee with a couple of teams in the 1890s. And Pete Lamar had a little session in the majors. The rest of them pretty much stayed in the minors, but a lot of good players. And that day, that last one picture we saw, September 29th, 1905, was actually a reunion game because baseball had kind of been track, basketball,
Yeah.
those
So
things
baseball
crept up
kinda got
in
put
the
on the back
1890s.
burner a little
So,
bit?
yeah, a little bit locally. So they wanted to get the town and the city, hyped again for baseball. So they put together this team and they played this game against the Cuban X-Giants, one of the first black professional teams.
Wow.
Now, the Cuban Giants and the Gorhams, the New York Gorhams, who were actually based out of Newburgh for a year, used to come through Middletown and play the Asylum teams quite often. So over a course of 10 years, I think the Asylum team won 12 of 22 games that they played against professional black teams.
Wow.
Now, in this particular photograph, it's the second photograph known of, let me see, which hand am I supposed to use? This guy, Frank Grant, probably the best black player in the 19th century.
And what year was this?
That was 1905.
1905.
Right.
Wow. And the major
So-
leagues didn't break until like 1947, right?
Integration with Branch Rickey bringing in Jackie Robinson. 1946, he brought him up to Montreal with the Royals, and then the following year brought him to the Dodgers.
Yeah, wow.
And that started the ball rolling.
What about female teams? Were there any like minor league female teams anywhere?
I knew you were going to throw me a curveball somewhere along the way.
I mean, not
yes.
locally, right? Oh, yeah, there were.
Originally, there were some women's teams that were started up in a couple of colleges. The first one was up in Poughkeepsie at Vassar College.
Wow.
In the 1860s,
Vassar, huh?
1870s, they
Holy.
played until all the parents got together and said that was unladylike behavior, and they made them stop playing. But there were, in the 1880s, 1890s, some women's teams cropped up that did barnstorming around the country. The Bloomer Girls and a few others.
Bloomer girls?
Yep, they used to go around the country and play the men.
That's unladylike.
And I guess it depends on what you're playing.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, there were, and of course the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, starting during World War II. As the professional ranks got thinned at a Major League Baseball, with
a lot
guys
of these
going in
good ball
service.
players were fighting wars.
Yep. So they had a women's league for about 5 or 6 years, and of course the movie. What was the name of the one movie? With Madonna.
League of Their Own.
League of Their Own, right?
Yep.
And we actually have the jersey that Madonna wore over at the Peekskill Museum.
Wow.
And
Now talk to me.
Yeah.
You're very active with the Peekskill Museum.
right.
And that has, is there baseball memorabilia there as well?
There's a bit there, and we've had a couple of exhibits over the years where I've added stuff to. Right now, it's just the museum has 3 or 4 old uniforms from the 20s and 30s that from some of the Twilight Leagues that were played there and all around the country. They've got some signed baseballs from the minor league club that was in Peekskill from 1946 to 49, the Peekskill Highlanders. And a few other odds and ends that they have there.
Now you get around to the Baseball Hall of Fame. I've been there, quite a few times, and you are somewhat involved with the Baseball Hall of Fame there. I mean, you.
Well, I'm a member of the hall, but that just means I send in a check every year. But
There you go.
I go every April to the Society for American Baseball Research, which started in 1971 by 17 baseball enthusiasts at that time. Now there's about 8,000 members.
Wow.
We have a 19th century committee, a minor league committee, and a Negro League committee, which those are the 3 that I have interest in. And we have an annual conference at the Hall of Fame in April every year. And so you get, it's limited to 60 people. You get the best historians in the country coming.
Wow.
John Thorne, the Major League Baseball historian, David Nemec. They're just all the top
People who
guys.
know this stuff.
And you know, written a lot of the books on baseball
You know,
history
I
too.
spent a lot of time with Roy Campanello, who
Yes.
was a personal friend, and we went up to the Arasaga a few times, and it's amazing because we went up before the actual ceremonies, so a lot of the guys kind of hang out there,
Right.
especially the guys who were being inducted that year. So we would sit around. They had baseball stories. They knew every little statistic, every little fact. They corrected each other. Well, yes, that's true, except
But-
Rolling Fingers didn't have the, and they would, it was
Right.
amazing,
Yeah.
the information that they had. And as you said, with the colored leagues, they had their little meetings and they discussed who's been in the Hall of Fame, who's going in the Hall of Fame. It was amazing, the politics and all of the discussion that went on behind the scenes.
Right. Well, you mentioned the black leagues and African American baseball, and I'm doing a couple of talks on that. But other than this, these black teams coming through Middletown kind of piqued my interest in that too. So I've done a lot of research into the early barnstorming teams, and probably up to the Negro Leagues. I haven't really gotten as far
Yeah.
into the Negro Leagues. But I get these things that I have to go do, like you said.
Yeah.
So we had the Cuban Giants, we had the Cuban X-Giants, we had the Newbergs, Gorhams, and then I find things like this out on the internet,
Oh,
and I have to find out what it is. So here
Yeah.
we have a baseball game in progress with people watching the game, most of whom are African American. If you look closely through lenses, you'll see that all but the players except the one are African American, and you see those shacks in the background. You say, well, what is this? Where was it? Who are these guys?
yeah.
So it says something about Springtown. Greetings from Springtown, which is right above New Paltz. So what I found out so far about this is obviously it was there. They used to have a lot of rooming houses and things along the strip that runs from New Paltz up to Rosendale. But African Americans, why were they there? And this, because most of them are dressed up, this is a Sunday after church.
Wow.
And who would have brought them there? Well, the Catskill Aqueduct was being built at the time, from 1906 to 1911, and they had a lot of black workers. And so I know where they lived when they were up at the Shokin Reservoir. I can't find anybody yet. This is one of my dead ends.
Yeah.
Where did they live when they were working through the New Paltz area on the way down till they were able to go under the Hudson? So that's one of my unfinished
Yeah.
projects.
It-
Yeah.
In addition to going to a lot of Dodger games, Yankee games, Met games with Roy, he was also invited to a lot of these little ballparks in the middle of nowhere. We used to drive and drive and drive, and Roy would say, "Does this ride ever end?" And then lo and behold, we pull up, and there'd be 200, 300, 400 people in these stands, and he would come out there and they would introduce him and they'd play these games. And I'm telling you, it's still a major pastime. My grandchildren live a block away from the East Field in Glens Falls, New York. And they have a ball field there, and there's a ball game all summer long. It's amazing that baseball is still alive and well.
True. Actually, after the World War II, there was a big shift over to softball. Now, first of all, you had all these guys coming home from the service. They wanted to play ball. And there was a tremendous increase in the number of minor leagues that cropped up all over the country. That's why you had the Peekskill Highlanders, for example, and the Poughkeepsie Chiefs in a different league. And a lot of local the Colonial League and the North Atlantic League took off for a few years. But in the early 50s, with television,
Yeah.
people said, I can see this stuff I can see the major leagues on TV. Why should I go out and watch
Yeah. And,
a bunch of
it
local
ain't
guys?
cheap.
So
tickets
that
today
really
is,
pushed amateur stuff over to softball, more recreational, but more out in upstate New York and
Yeah.
other areas of the country. They're still playing a lot more hardball than they are in this area. There's a couple of leagues going. There's an over 30 league in Westchester, but for the most part, I played in a 60 and over league in. For Glen Cove, the Glen Cove Vikings softball league.
Really? So you were a ball
10
player
years
yourself.
ago.
So you're a ball player?
Well, I stopped about 3-4 years ago. I gave it up. I don't see the ball as well. I played for 47 years.
Was there a favorite position?
Well, I played center or left for the most part.
It's funny. I've heard Roy Campanello talk a few times, and a kid asked him one time. He said, "Why did you decide to be a catcher?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you. I went to the tryouts, and the only position that didn't have a lot of people waiting was catcher." He said, "So I figured I have a good chance if I go to that."
Yeah.
He said, and that's how I ended up becoming a catcher.
Plus, you don't have to be a fast runner necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now,
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about you're out and around. You're doing talks, and tell me a little bit about that.
Well, a current theme that I'm using is baseball in black and white, and I'm covering the evolution of baseball from the 1830s
Wow.
up until the 1920s, basically, and paralleling what was going on with white baseball while what was going on with African American baseball,
Right.
and some of the key hurdles that were put in place to keep the blacks out of white baseball, because there were about 140
Yeah.
black players in the minor leagues up until the 1890s.
Wow.
So maybe there were about 20 when it finally, when they finally got pushed out completely. But I talk about some of the great players of that era, and then some of
Satchel
the
Pages
legislation.
and,
Well, Page is a little later.
Yeah.
But
he was.
he was
discovered
something.
what a great ball player.
Matter of fact, I had a friend who unfortunately passed away about a year ago out of Poughkeepsie, who passed away at age 95. He was a pro ball player. He never made it to the majors. They wanted him, but he didn't want to play. He played locally all around in Poughkeepsie and Kingston and Millbrook, and he pitched against Page twice. He said, "Yeah, he beat me once, and I beat him once." They said, "What's a pitcher like you doing here in Kingston? You should be pitching in the major league."
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's you get
Now-
some connections.
You have a couple more pictures there that you want to show, and unbelievably, time is flying. So,
Okay. Well, this is the last. This one is another little project of mine. and it's-
Hospital defeats cavalry.
Again, we're going back to the Middletown's Asylum, which changed its name, but it was the state hospital in the 30s. This is 1922, actually. I got this thing. It's Hospital Defeats Cavalry. That's the West Point Colored Cavalry.
Wow.
Now, I went up to West Point to research it. They've purged all their records of this black team. But I've gone out online now and gotten some information from other historians. And so I'm trying to put together a little more about, well, how long did they have this segregated team? What era? And
Has the
Just a little
internet
bit more about it.
changed your research abilities? I mean, there must be some things now. I know even with
Yep.
Sybil, all of a sudden things pop up. When I was doing her book in 2000, there were some things that were nowhere near the internet. And little by little, things get added without your even knowing it. So there must be some more information now that keeps popping up. Do you find that your job is endless?
well, some of these guys that do this for a living and things, they're members of a lot of different sites that you have to pay for,
Yeah.
newspaper archives and a few other things. I used to be a member of that, but they have very little New York information. They have Syracuse and Middletown, that's it for New York State. Yes, there's a place called Baseball Reference, baseballreference.com, where you can find the
All kinds of
statistics
things.
on every player that ever played,
Wow.
majors and minors. Now, they're not 100% complete, but that's always a good first
There's
place to
information,
start.
yeah.
You know.
So you can get hands on it. So another place to get information is from lecturers like you. Where are we going to see you? Are you coming up pretty soon?
Well,
What is this here?
I've got two things going on this month. I have my talk on baseball in black and white at the Ossining Public Library next Wednesday
Goodness,
evening
Austin. Oh, okay.
at 7 p.m. Again, a free program. And then on February 26th at the Peekskill Museum. We're going to give basically the same presentation. Most of my my presentations are always very visual because
Yeah,
I am a very
yeah,
visual person.
Tended to come.
So I do about 25 slides. They all have 2, 3, 4 pictures on them. You'll get a lot of visual acuity along with hopefully some information that you can take home with you.
So, we have about 58 seconds left. Any final words? Anything you'd like to say to the audience?
Well, of course, I'm always, as a collector, I'm always looking for things.
And there's things out there, and there's all
things,
kinds
yeah.
of. So
Anything related to the Hudson Valley,
Yeah,
early
memorabilia.
baseball,
and
or
there are museums
information.
like the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
places where you can see baseball history.
Right.
And it's what I always say with all history. If we don't teach the children of today about their yesterday, we're going to steal a piece of their tomorrow.
Right.
Kids should learn about baseball not only as a pastime, but as something that's part of our being. And your being here.
Well,
been
thank
a
you.
treat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Pat.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all you do. Every time you find memorabilia, put it together, you're saving a piece of our history. Thank you for joining us today. Think baseball. Spring is coming. Thank you for being here.
Okay.